Glad you're here. We come together tonight on this Good Friday to reflect on the cross through worship and through communion. And tonight I would like everybody to remain seated. Normally when we sing songs we stand, but I'd like you to remain seated as this is a solemn occasion. And I want to look at the cross words of Jesus tonight. Has anybody ever had somebody who said a cross word to them? Well, Jesus said cross words from the cross, the things that he said before he died. And so I'd like to go over some of those tonight. Before we start singing, I want to look at the first crossword. It's found in Luke chapter 23, verse 34. It says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And this first saying of Jesus on the cross reveals how he treated other people who mistreated him. To a world that injured him and insulted him, he offered forgiveness. And as Jesus prayed this prayer, while in the process of being crucified, I'm sure that he had on his mind not only the Roman soldiers who were carrying out the very act of crucifixion, but I think he had on his mind also the religious leaders who hated him. I think he had on his mind a priest who bought him with 30 pieces of silver. I think he had on his mind the traitor Judas who betrayed him, and the crowd who called out, "Crucify him, crucify him." I think he had on his mind Pontius Pilate for knowingly by his own mouth allowing an innocent man to be crucified. And not only these obvious ones, but how about the band of disciples that had been with him for some 3.5 years, and they fled and deserted him when he gets arrested. And then he also had in his mind everyone who was ever born, including you and including me, because it was our sins that placed him on the cross. So the wonder of this statement from the cross is that there's forgiveness for us. Centuries later, there's still forgiveness for us. No matter what we've done, no matter how long we've done it, when we come to Jesus, he still says, "Father, forgive them." This first song that we're singing is the song, "This Is Our God." And the words of this says, "Freely you gave it all for us. Surrendered your life upon the cross. Great is your love poured out for us. This is our God." Grace is enough, more than I need. At your word I will believe. I wait for you, draw you again. Let your spirit make me new. I will fall at your feet. I will fall. Jesus, light the second crossword that he said from the cross is found in Luke 23 and verse 43. He says, I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise. The first crossword embraces for all mankind forgiveness. But the second one narrows it down to an individual. Narrows it down to an individual needy sinner. And this statement was said by Jesus in response to one of the thieves who was crucified with him. And that thief cried out, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus responds to him personally, individually. And right at the point of death, Jesus desired to save him. His last friend on earth was a sinner. And as Jesus hung on that cross, not only did he have all of humanity in mind, but he also had individuals, all the individuals that make up humanity in his mind. He not only had this man in his mind, but you were on his mind. And I was on his mind individually. And this not only speaks of heaven, but it speaks of friendship. It speaks of companionship. Listen to what he says. You will be with me. We will be with him. He will be with us. Where he is, John 14 says, we will be also. The 23rd Psalm that is so familiar and known by many of you says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? For thou art with me. And most Christians will have to go through just the valley of the shadow of death to get to heaven. But they won't be alone. They will get an escort. So the wonder of this crossword is that not only is there heaven to look forward to, but there's companionship with Jesus as well. He will walk with us. He will talk with us. And right to the end of his life, Jesus was reaching out to the lost. He was speaking a crossword of hope, the hope of heaven. And right to the end of this man's life, he was still reaching out to save him. This next song says, thank you for the cross. Thank you for the price you paid. Bearing all my sin and shame. In love you came and gave amazing grace. Grace is something that we don't deserve. Thank you for the nail-pierced hands. Wash me in your cleansing flow. Now all I know is forgiveness and embrace. Worthy is the Lamb.
For the price you paid.
Worthy is the Lamb that was slain. The third crossword that I want to look at tonight is recorded in John chapter 19, verse 26. And Jesus said to his mother, "Dear woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." The first crossword is a word of forgiveness. The second one is a word of companionship and hope of heaven. And now at the heart of the third crossword is a relationship of love and provision. In verse 25 of this passage in the King James Version, it says, "Now there stood by the cross," think of that phrase for a moment. "Now there stood by the cross of Jesus his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleophas, and Mary Magdalene." You see, God sees those who stick by the cross and stand by the cross. God sees those who love him even through difficult situations, when they stand with him in those difficult situations. The ones who will stand by him when the going gets tough, he sees them. He provides for them. And so many today start out with Jesus. But as soon as a little problem comes along, or sometimes a big problem comes along, they run, they desert and forsake him. He will come through for those who will stand by him. "Dear woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And the disciple that Jesus was referring to in this passage is the disciple John. And John wrote 5 books of the New Testament. And much of what he wrote contains several of the most important statements that we know about love. "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." And then he wrote, "These greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends." And then he wrote this, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God." And so many more he wrote concerning this phrase of provision and love. So this third statement is one of the relationship. One of a relationship of love. One of a relationship of provision. And then I want you to think about this. This is the ministry of the church. When he spoke to John, he said, "Take care of the woman." The church is the woman. Remember, the church is the mother. Remember what Jesus said in Matthew 12, when people came to him and said, "Jesus, your mother and your brothers are here to see you." And he said, "Who is my mother? Who are my brothers?" And then pointing to the disciples, he said, "Here are my mother. Here are my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." So Jesus is telling us to take care of one another. He instructed us to become his agents of care and love. Let's sing together the next song, "Jesus Won It All." feel the presence of the Lord in his room. As he hung on the cross, he uttered the fourth crossword for us tonight. Recorded in Matthew 27, he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And out of the darkness comes this loud cry, a piercing cry. It's not a cry against God. It was a cry to God. And at that moment, Jesus was all alone. More than anyone could have ever been alone. Completely forsaken by God. Forsaken is a word that brings up the worst of human experiences. Husbands leaving their wives and wives leaving their husbands. It speaks of divorce. It speaks of loneliness, rejection, and all the hurts and all the pains and of the abandonment of death. The night before his trial, Jesus had told his disciples that in his hour of trial, they would all desert him. But he said, yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. But now, in the climax of his passion, at the moment of making atonement for our sin and the sin of the entire world that was heaped upon him, it was necessary at this moment that even the Father turn away. It was a crossword for substitution. It is an act of one person taking the place of and experiencing something for another person. He who knew no sin was made sin for us. He who knew no sin was substituted for us who were sinners, and he experienced for us the penalty of sin so that we should not have to experience it. He who was made sin for us was feeling the punishment for the sinner, being separated from God. And as bad as all the physical anguish of the cross was up to this point, this thing that he faces now was the worst thing Jesus ever had to face. He faced the worst thing for a moment so that we wouldn't have to face it for eternity. And it's not eternity in the fire and the torments of hell and the gnashing of teeth that make it hell. As horrible as that is going to be, it is having God turn away from us that will make it an eternal hell. Jesus experienced it so that we wouldn't have to. So this crossword is a word of substitution with the idea of a scapegoat in mind. A scapegoat is one who is made an object of blame for another. And just as the scapegoat of the Old Testament had to be banished into the God-forsaken wilderness all alone, so Jesus had to bear the sin of the world alone, literally God-forsaken. And never before in eternity past had he ever felt this degree of pain of being forsaken by his Father. He became for a moment God-forsaken so that we could experience the presence of God for eternity. So he asked the question, my God, why have you forsaken me? And the answer was, so that we need never be forsaken. That's the mercy and the grace of God as we sing this next song, Grace to Grace.
Endured that ancient cross. see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. And from death to life, I will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. And from death to life, I will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. And from death to life, I will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I'll see Jesus. And from death to life, I will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. How my soul will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. How my soul will sing your praise. How wonderful, how glorious, my Savior's cross, victorious. My chains are my praise, my death to life, in grace to grace, when I see that cross, I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I see Jesus. From death to life, I will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. When I see that cross, I see freedom. When I see that grave, I see Jesus. From death to life, I will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. How my soul will sing your praise in the wonder of your grace. How my soul will sing your praise. How wonderful, how glorious, my Savior's cross, victorious. My chains are my praise today. Death to life, grace to
When I see that cross, I see freedom. Thank you for the cross. The fifth crossword that we want to look at tonight, in John 19, verse 28, Jesus said, I am thirsty. The hours of torture on the cross had taken its toll on the human body of Jesus. Execution by crucifixion was not like it is today. It was not the sudden death of the firing squad or lethal injection or the electric chair. Crucifixion was a long, drawn-out, lingering death. It was the ninth hour, more than 6 hours after his crucifixion began. And a combination of the torture, the combination of the heat of the day and the hours on the cross and the loss of blood caused his body to start cramping and his breathing to become labored. His wounds would become infected, resulting in fever and dehydration. The crossword is a statement of the agony of a sacrificial offering. The prophetic 23rd Psalm, which prophesied this event and speaks about his condition, says this: I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. In agony, he was poured out as an offering. Jesus didn't suffer as the Son of God isolated from human weaknesses and feeling. He suffered as the Son of Man, subject to all the same feelings that we have and all the same pain that we have. All the things that are subject to us were upon him. He who is and who gives the water of life emptied himself of water so that he thirsted. So we'll never have to thirst. This next song is Grace Flows Down.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Amazing love, now flowing down from hands and feet that were nailed to the tree. His grace flows down and covers me. Amazing grace, amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Amazing love, now flowing down from hands and feet that were nailed to the tree. His grace flows down and covers me. It covers me.
the sixth crossword, John 19:30, as he hung there with his arms outstretched. It is finished. What did Jesus mean by that statement? It is finished. What was the it that he was referring to? Was it referring to his suffering? Was it referring to he was finally coming to the end of his life? It was those things, but so much more were caught up in those three crosswords. The word finished is the word completed, accomplished, mission accomplished. It was the end of an age. When Abraham Lincoln's life came to an end and his life's work was finished, the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, uttered these words, "Now he belongs to the ages." But of Jesus, when his work was finished, it can be said that now the ages belong to him. He redeemed all that Adam and Eve had lost in the Garden of Eden. And throughout the ages were many Old Testament prophetic words and prophecies concerning the life of Jesus, concerning the work of Jesus and the death of Jesus and the accomplishment of Jesus. And at that moment on the cross, those prophecies were all completed. It was a conquest, an accomplishment. It was a statement of victory. I want you to notice something. He doesn't say, "I am finished." He says, "It is finished." It was a shout of victory over sin. It was a shout of victory over Satan. It was a shout of victory over death and over hell. Complete satisfaction was made for the debt that was incurred by the whole human race. The crossword said, "It is finished," also to the rituals of the sacrifice of animals. Because now he has become the one-time sacrifice for all time. The crossword said that the work of man's redemption was finished, complete, and accomplished. Jesus had offered himself without spot, without blemish, to God. And by that one sacrifice for sin, once and for all, he had done all that was required to reconcile the entire world to God. Nothing more was needed on his part. "It is finished" means that Jesus has completed everything necessary for our salvation. It is like paying the last payment on your mortgage. It is finished. That's a good feeling. I've done all that is required of me to purchase this home. Jesus has done all that was required of him to purchase our salvation. And we cannot add anything to his finished work. We can't say we must do this to be saved. Why? Because he said it is finished. He was born for this. Bethlehem wasn't so much about his beginning as a baby as it was leading up to being finished on the cross. Let's sing this next song, "Lead Me to the Cross."
Savior, I come, quiet my soul. to your heart. Lead me to your heart. Lead me to your heart. Lead me to the cross where your love poured out. Lead me to my knees, Lord, I lay me down. Rid me of myself, I belong to you. Lord, lead me. Lead me to the cross where your love poured out. Bring me to my knees, Lord, I lay me down. Rid me of myself, I belong to you. Lord, lead me.
We're going to do that song one more time at the end of this next point to lead us to the cross. I want to talk about the seventh crossword found in Luke chapter 23, verse 46. Father, into your hands, he said, I commit my spirit. The first statement from the cross begins with Jesus addressing his Father. Father, forgive them. And here it begins the last statement, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. These words tell us that no one took his life. He committed his spirit. And so it was that Jesus willingly gave his life. He laid it upon the altar of the cross. This last crossword is a quotation from Psalm 31:5, when David committed his spirit also to God when he faced life-threatening situation. And Jesus identified with David's affliction like he identifies with ours. He identified with David's anguish like he identifies with ours. And David here was a type of Christ. And the crossword speaks of faith. The crossword speaks of confidence and assurance in God. Whatever happens, I commit myself to you. This is basically what the Apostle Paul said when he said, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. I commit myself to you. No matter what happens in this life, knowing that either way, I win. And from this last crossword, we too can have faith in the midst of our situation. We too can have confidence in the Word of God and assurance of His presence no matter what happens. 2 Timothy 1 verse 12 says, for I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that He is able to keep that which I've committed unto Him against that day. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Substitute just for a moment the word spirit for the word situation. Father, into your hands I commit my situation. Substitute the word health. Father, into your hands I commit my health. Substitute the word finances. Father, into your hands I commit my finances. I commit my marriage. I commit my family. Let's sing that song again, Lead Me to the Cross. You can stand for this one.
Savior, I come, quiet my soul. Remember, redemption's hell, where your blood was spilled for my ransom. Everything I once had
You may be seated. All of these crossroads that I mentioned tonight that came from the lips of Jesus provide something for every one of us. Father, forgive them, provides forgiveness. You will be with me in paradise provides heaven and companionship. Mother hears your son, and son hears your mother, provides a relationship of love and provision. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Provides a substitution for our sin. I am thirsty, provides for us a sacrificial offering. It is finished, provides victory. Into your hands I commit my spirit, provides faith and confidence and assurance. And communion is all of these things wrapped up into the bread and the cup. When the hour had come, he reclined at the table, and the apostles with him. And he said to them, I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. And Jesus took some bread, and after blessing it, he broke it. And he gave it to his disciples, and he said, take, eat. This is my body, which is given for you. And when he had taken a cup and given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for forgiveness of sins. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread, and as often as you drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. And we're going to partake of the bread and the cup and proclaim the Lord's death. We're going to literally come to the table. There's 14 spots. So as the music starts, as the Lord lays it on your heart, just come and kneel at one of these places if you're able to. If you're not, stand. I purposely made the bread a little bit larger because I want you to spend a few moments chewing on it. I want you to spend a few moments thinking of what Christ did on that cross for you personally. So, Father, I want to pray a blessing upon the bread. Lord, that bread that represents your broken body. Lord, we think of all that you endured even before you went to the cross, much less after you got there. But every whip and every scourge and every punch and every beating, every hit of the staff was part of that broken body. And your word says that broken body was for our healing. And so, Lord, even as we come and partake tonight of the bread, I pray that healings will take place. And then, Lord, I ask your blessing upon the cup of the new covenant, that shed blood. You shed your blood for our forgiveness. And Lord, as we partake of that tonight, may we not do so flippantly. But Lord, as we take it, may we ponder and think about the sacrifice that you so loved the world that you gave yourself. You spilled your blood for us. Paul, could you start the music? And just take your time. We have all night. But just come to the altar, come to the table. There's room for 14.
Every table is an altar. Every breath is a gift from you. Every moment is a treasure. Every day is a kiss from you. This is every table. Every table is an altar. Every breath is a gift.
And after you partake, just leave the place solemnly and you're dismissed after you partake.
Every moment